She was the daughter of a brilliant surgeon, raised in privilege and surrounded by every comfort money could buy. Yet, despite all the wealth, one thing had always been out of reach. She had never walked a single step in her life. Doctors from around the world tried and failed, each one leaving behind only shattered hope. Her father's reputation as a healer only deepened the irony, making the wound heavier with every passing year. And then, against all odds, the miracle came not from a doctor, not from wealth, but from the most unexpected place, a homeless black boy whose courage would change everything. The surgeon's home was a world of contrasts. On one side, it stood as a symbol of success. Towering walls, manicured lawns, and polished floors that reflected a life of privilege. Inside, walls were lined with certificates, awards, and photographs of a man celebrated as one of the finest medical minds of his generation. People whispered his name with reverence, trusting him with the most delicate surgeries, believing his hands could perform miracles. But behind those grand doors lived a heartbreak no degree or title could heal. His only daughter had never taken a step. From the moment she was born, her legs remained motionless, unresponsive to every attempt at therapy. Specialists were flown in from every corner of the world, each one confident they could succeed where others had failed. Yet every test, every surgery, every experimental procedure ended the same way, in silence and disappointment. The irony cut deep. A man who gave hope to countless families carried despair in his own home. For his daughter, life was an endless cycle of wheelchairs, hospital visits, and hopeful beginnings that always turned into crushing ends. The world saw her as fragile, broken, someone defined by what she could not do, and though she had known nothing but kindness from her father, she often wondered if her condition was more of a burden than a life. Yet life has a way of writing its own stories, often through the most unlikely characters. On the other side of town, far from polished walls and expensive hospitals, a boy without a home and without possessions carried within him something far more powerful than wealth or training. His path would soon collide with hers, and nothing about their worlds, or the prejudices that separated them, would ever be the same again. The girl's days were measured in routine, physical therapy sessions, endless medical appointments, and long hours staring out the window at a world she could not touch. The mansion was filled with luxury, but to her it felt like a gilded cage. Outside, she watched children running across the street, their laughter echoing like a distant dream. Every step they took was a reminder of what she had been denied. Her father never stopped searching for answers. He poured money into research, invited specialists from every continent, and even funded experimental programs. But medicine had its limits, and with every failed attempt, the silence in their home grew heavier. Neighbors admired their wealth, but whispers followed. How can the great surgeon heal strangers but not his own daughter? For the girl, those whispers were daggers, reminders that pity often walked hand in hand with judgment. Meanwhile, across town, life couldn't have been more different. The homeless boy had no mansion, no family name to protect, no promises of tomorrow. His bed was often a cold bench under the open sky, his meals scraps from strangers' kindness. Society looked at him not with pity, but with suspicion, as though his very existence was a threat. He knew the sting of being unseen, unwanted, and cast aside. Yet beneath the layers of hardship lived a resilience that no one could erase. Fate, however, has a way of weaving paths together. One afternoon, as the surgeon's daughter sat outside the hospital during yet another round of tests, their eyes met. He was sitting nearby, quiet and overlooked, clutching a small worn-out notebook filled with sketches and strange designs. Most people walked past him as if he were invisible, but she noticed something in his gaze, an intensity, a spark of determination she hadn't seen even in the doctors who promised her miracles. The boy had watched people his whole life. How they moved, how they carried themselves, how balance and rhythm were built into the human body. What he lacked in education, he made up for in observation and raw instinct. And when he saw the surgeon's daughter struggling, something inside him whispered that he could help. The thought was laughable to everyone else. A homeless boy with no training, daring to believe he could succeed where doctors had failed? It was unthinkable. Yet it was that very impossibility that gave the moment its power. For in a world divided by wealth, race, and status, the greatest transformations often come from where no one expects. And so the stage was set. A girl who had never walked, a boy who had never been given a chance, and a moment where dignity, hope, and courage would defy every boundary drawn by society. The hospital courtyard was busy that afternoon, filled with patients, nurses, and visitors hurrying past without a second glance. But in one quiet corner, an extraordinary moment was unfolding. The girl sat in her chair, her father speaking with yet another specialist nearby, when the homeless boy approached. His clothes were worn, his hands rough, but his eyes carried an unshakable certainty. He knelt beside her wheelchair, not with pity, but with purpose. For the first time, she didn't feel like someone to be cared for. She felt seen. The boy gestured gently, motioning as if to say, "Trust me." Something inside her, an instinct she couldn't explain, leaned into that trust. She let him place his hand on hers, his touch steady, confident, as though he had been preparing for this moment his entire life. The first attempt was clumsy. Her legs trembled, unused to carrying her weight. The crowd that had begun to gather looked on with skepticism, some shaking their heads, others whispering cruelly. A surgeon with the world's best resources had failed, and now a homeless boy thought he could succeed. It was absurd. But then, something remarkable happened. Step by step, inch by inch, her body began to respond. It wasn't medicine. It wasn't surgery. It was the power of belief, the boy's unwavering conviction meeting the girl's desperate hope. The world around them blurred as she rose higher, her knees locking, her frame trembling, until suddenly, she was standing. Gasps filled the air. Her father dropped his papers, rushing toward her with wide, disbelieving eyes. Nurses froze mid-step. The girl, who had never known what it felt like to stand on her own, was now upright, her hand still. In the boy's, tears welled in her eyes, not from pain but from triumph. She wasn't walking perfectly. Her steps were fragile, unsteady, but they were hers. And with each step, the weight of pity, doubt, and impossibility crumbled to dust. What the world of privilege and science couldn't give, a boy society had, cast aside, had awakened. In that moment, the impossible was no longer impossible. The courtyard never forgot that day. For those who witnessed it, the moment etched itself into their memories like a scar of awe. A girl who had lived her life bound by a chair, her dreams confined to stillness, had taken steps no one thought possible. And beside her stood not a world-renowned doctor, not a celebrated specialist, but a homeless black boy whom society had dismissed as worthless. For her father, the irony cut deeper than ever. Years of searching for answers had led him across continents, through research papers, into operating rooms filled with the best minds. Yet the spark that unlocked his daughter's first steps came from someone the world never considered important. As he looked at the boy, shame and humility collided in his chest. His profession had taught him that healing was reserved for those with education, training, and wealth. But here was proof that healing was something more. A combination of heart, courage, and belief. The boy asked for nothing in return. No applause, no money, no recognition. In truth, he didn't expect anyone to believe in him. But for the girl, his presence was life itself. From that day, her journey would still be long, rehabilitation, practice, and countless challenges ahead. But the impossible had already been broken. She had stood, she had walked, and she would never again see herself as less than whole. The crowd dispersed with whispers not of cruelty but of wonder. Some were moved to tears, others to guilt. For the first time, they questioned the way they had judged him, the way they judged anyone who didn't fit neatly into their definition of worth. The boy walked away quietly, blending back into the shadows of a city that had never cared for him. Yet in his absence, he left behind a story that would echo far louder than his silence. For the surgeon's daughter, the lesson was clear. Strength is not defined by status, nor healing by wealth. And for those watching, a question lingers like an open wound. How many miracles have we ignored simply because they came from the hands of those society chooses not to see? Because in the end, dignity has no home, compassion has no title, and sometimes the greatest power belongs to the ones the world tries hardest to erase.